It happened on a Wednesday, at 11 o'clock at night, when most people are already in bed. I was still in my scrubs, still smelling like hospital disinfectant and someone else's grief, when I heard the noise. Not a knock, not a doorbell. It was the sound of a key scraping against a lock that no longer fit, followed by a fist hitting wood hard enough to shake the frame. I stood in my kitchen holding a cup of soup I hadn't touched yet, listening. Then I heard my mother's voice. "Rachel, open this door. This is still a family home." I set the cup down slowly. 7 years of emergency nursing does something to your nervous system. It teaches you that the worst moments don't announce themselves with sirens. They arrive quietly, in ordinary clothes, at ordinary hours. You learn to breathe before you react. You learn that the first few seconds determine everything. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My mother stood in the hallway with her arms crossed, wearing the same expression she wore every time she'd decided something was already settled. Behind her was my brother standing with his hands in his pockets, looking at the floor the way he always did when he knew he was wrong but had already committed to it. And behind him, barely visible, was his girlfriend holding a cardboard box. A cardboard box. I unlocked the door and opened it, not wide, just enough. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My mother's eyes moved past me into the apartment. "We need to talk." "It's 11 at night," I said. "I just got off a 12-hour shift." "I know," she said. "That's why we waited. We didn't want to disturb you at work." I looked at my brother. He still wasn't looking at me. "Ryan," I said. "What's in the box?" He finally looked up. "Just some things. We thought maybe if we got started." "Got started," I repeated. My mother put her hand on the doorframe like she was about to step inside. "We talked to a real estate attorney, Rachel. The way the deed is structured, with both our names on the original application." "My name," I said. "My name is on the deed. Mine. Alone." She blinked like I'd said something in another language. "You wouldn't have qualified without our help." "I qualified because I worked 16-hour shifts for 4 years and didn't spend a single dollar I didn't have to," I said. "You co-signed a phone plan for me in 2019. That's not the same thing." "Family contributed," she said, her voice dropping into that tone, the one that carried the weight of every favor she'd ever logged in her mental ledger. "Ryan needs somewhere stable right now. His lease is ending, and his situation." "His situation," I said, "is not my mortgage." The hallway was quiet for a moment. A neighbor's television murmured through the wall. My brother shifted his weight, and the cardboard box rustled. My mother's expression didn't change. It never changed when she'd already decided something. She had a gift for treating her own conclusions as pre-existing facts. "You have 2 bedrooms," she said. "I have a home office," I said. "Rachel." "Good night," I said. And I closed the door. I stood with my back against it for a long time, listening to them talk in the hallway in low voices. I heard my brother say something about calling a lawyer. I heard my mother say something about this not being over. Then I heard the elevator open and close, and then there was nothing. I picked up my soup, which had gone cold, and sat on the couch in the dark. The problem wasn't that night. The problem was everything that had led to it. 3 years earlier, I had been 29 years old, working nights in the cardiac unit at Houston Methodist, living in a studio apartment the size of a generous closet. I had exactly one financial goal: buy something that was mine. Not rented. Not borrowed. Mine. 4 walls and a roof with my name on a document that no one could take back. I saved for 2 years while working doubles every chance I got. I ate at the hospital cafeteria more often than I want to admit. I drove a car that had no air conditioning in Houston, which is its own particular kind of suffering. But I had a number in my head and I hit it, and when I walked into that mortgage lender's office, I had a credit score of 748, a down payment in full, and 3 years of clean tax returns. The 2-bedroom condo in Midtown closed on a Tuesday in March. I remember standing in the empty living room after the keys were handed over, just listening to the quiet, thinking about how strange it was that peace could feel so physical, so present, like something you could breathe in. I didn't tell my family right away. Not because I was hiding it, but because the apartment felt like the first thing in my life that belonged entirely to me, and I wanted to hold on to that feeling for just a little while before sharing it. My mother found out through my aunt, who I'd mentioned it to in passing. By the time she called me, she'd already formed an opinion about what the apartment meant and who it was for. 2 bedrooms, she said on the phone. "That's generous for one person." "It's not generous," I said. "It's a home office. I'm studying for my CRNA certification. You could study in the living room." "Mum," Your brother's lease is up in 4 months, she said. Just something to think about. I thought about it. I thought about how my brother was 32 years old and had left 3 jobs in the past 2 years, and how every time he ran out of runway, the family's collective gaze turned toward whoever was standing on solid ground. I thought about how the last time I'd helped him, I'd lent him $4,000 that came back as $300 and a promise I stopped waiting on. I'll think about it, I said, which was a mistake, because in my family, thinking about something is the same as saying yes in installments. The months that followed were quiet. Ryan's lease ended and he moved in with our mother, which I had hoped would settle things. It didn't. What it did was give them time to talk every day about the apartment and how it was sitting there with a whole extra bedroom just going to waste on a desk and a bookshelf. My mother started visiting more. She'd bring food, which was kind, and then she'd walk through the apartment the way people walk through places they're measuring for furniture. She'd pause in the doorway of the second bedroom and say nothing, but the silence had a shape to it. In September, Ryan started texting me. Casual at first, then less casual. Hey, just wondering if you'd ever thought more about the room thing. Mom said you mentioned it might be possible. I'd pay rent, obviously. Whatever's fair. I told him the room wasn't available. He texted back a thumbs up and nothing else for 3 weeks, which with Ryan was never nothing. I should have installed better locks then. I should have done a lot of things. The night they showed up with the cardboard box was a Wednesday in November. I've already told you what happened at the door. What I haven't told you is what happened 2 days later, when I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. The woman on the other end introduced herself as a paralegal from a property law office in Houston. Miss Navarro, she said. I'm calling because a claim of cohabitation rights has been filed in your name and one other, a Ryan Navarro, regarding a residential property at... I sat down on the kitchen floor. I'm not sure why the floor. It was just the closest surface. I'm sorry, I said. Can you say that again? She said it again. My brother had gone to a lawyer, not to dispute the deed, which was clean, but to argue that he had an established right to residency based on a verbal agreement I had apparently made. I made no verbal agreement, I said. The filing suggests otherwise, she said carefully. There's a claim of a witnessed conversation in which you indicated the second bedroom would be available for family use. The conversation, the one on the phone, 9 months ago. I'll think about it. My mother had been in the room when I said it. My mother, who apparently had a better memory for what I'd said than for what she'd cost me. I thanked the paralegal and hung up. Then I sat on my kitchen floor for a while longer, listening to the refrigerator hum. Here is what I knew. The deed was in my name. The mortgage was in my name. Every payment for 3 years had come from my account, on time, without a single late notice. I had documentation for all of it. Here is what I didn't know. Whether any of that would be enough, or whether the law had some provision for families who confused wishful thinking with legal standing. I called my coworker and closest friend, Diane, who had once helped me navigate a billing dispute with our hospital's HR department with the same focused energy other people bring to international negotiations. Tell me everything, she said. I told her everything. Okay, she said when I finished. First thing tomorrow, you call a real estate attorney. Not a general practice lawyer. Someone who specifically handles residential property disputes. Second, you pull every document you have related to that condo. The closing paperwork, the title, the mortgage statements, all of it. Third, you stop answering calls from your mother and your brother until you have legal representation. They're my family, I said. They filed a legal claim against you, she said, not unkindly. The family part is their problem to work out. Your problem right now is the property. She was right. She was the kind of right that I didn't want to hear and already knew. The next morning, I called a property law firm that Diane had found. The attorney who took my case was a woman named Patricia Owens, and she had a voice like someone who had heard every version of this story and was no longer surprised by any of them. Walk me through it from the beginning, she said. I walked her through it. The purchase. The phone call. The visit with the cardboard box. The filing. The cohabitation claim is weak, she said. Verbal agreements for residential rights require substantially more than a phone conversation that your brother witnessed third hand through your mother. But weak doesn't mean costless. We'll need to respond formally and document your exclusive occupancy. How do we do that? Utility bills in your name only. Mail addressed solely to you. Your mortgage statements. Photos of the space dated over time. Anything that establishes continuous sole occupancy. I had all of it. 3 years of it, organized in folders on my laptop, the way only people who've ever had to prove something to someone understand. Patricia filed a formal response to the claim within the week. She was thorough. She was also expensive, which I paid without telling anyone because the alternative was worse. While the legal process moved forward in the slow, grinding way legal processes do, my family moved into a different phase. Ryan stopped texting me directly. My mother started calling, first once a day, then twice, then in groups of 3 calls separated by just enough time to feel like separate attempts. I answered the 3rd day. I don't know why. Maybe I was tired. Maybe some part of me still believed the conversation could be different. "You hired an attorney," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "Against your own family. To protect my own property," I said. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had that particular softness she used when she wanted something. "Rachel, I raised you better than this. We stick together. That's what this family does." "You filed a legal claim against my home," I said. "That's what this family did. Your brother did what he had to do. He's struggling. You know how hard things have been for him." I did know. I had always known. The knowing was the thing that had kept me accommodating long past the point when I should have stopped. "I know he's struggling," I said. "But I worked for 7 years for that apartment. I gave up vacations and a social life and decent meals to save for it. It is not a solution to his struggles. It is my home." "You're being selfish," she said. That word. She had used it so many times over my life that it had almost lost meaning. Almost. "I'll be in touch through Patricia Owens's office," I said, and I hung up. Diane came over that evening with takeout and the particular calm of someone who understood that what I needed was not advice but company. We sat on my couch, and she let me talk through everything I'd been carrying around for weeks. "The part that gets me," I said, "is that they don't even think they're doing something wrong. My mom genuinely believes that because I have more than I need, what I have becomes communal. Like success is supposed to dilute itself through everyone who's related to me." Diane handed me a container of soup. Some families treat the person who builds something like a resource instead of a person. I sat with that for a while. "When did it start?" she asked. I thought about it honestly. "When I got into nursing school," I said. "Before that, I was just the younger one. After that, I was the one who was going to be stable enough to carry everyone else." "And you did it," she said. "For a long time," I said. "Yeah." The legal response came back from Ryan's attorney within 3 weeks. The cohabitation claim was amended, which Patricia told me meant they'd realized the original argument wouldn't hold. The new claim was narrower. A dispute over whether a verbal agreement constituted a promissory obligation. "They're reaching," Patricia said. "But we respond anyway." We responded. More documentation, more statements. More hours of my evenings spent at a desk reviewing paperwork instead of studying for the certification exam I'd been planning for 2 years. I installed a security camera by the front door. Not because I expected anything dramatic, but because Diane had suggested it and because documentation, I was learning, was the only currency that mattered in disputes like these. 2 nights after the camera went up, it recorded my brother in the hallway at midnight, holding what appeared to be a locksmith's kit. I watched the footage in the morning with my coffee going cold beside me. I sent it to Patricia before breakfast. She called me within the hour. "This changes things significantly," she said, her voice carrying a new weight. "Attempted unauthorized entry is not a civil matter anymore. If you want to pursue it, this crosses into criminal territory." I sat with that for a long time. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "I recommend we send a formal cease and desist to both your brother and your mother, citing this footage as evidence of attempted forced entry. We also request that the civil claim be withdrawn in full. If they don't comply within 30 days, we file charges." "Will they comply?" I asked. "When people realize the footage exists," she said, "they usually do." She was right about that too. The cease and desist went out on a Thursday. By Saturday, my mother had called 11 times. I didn't answer. By Monday, she had sent my aunt to my apartment with a casserole and a letter that she handed to me at the door like she was serving papers herself. I thanked my aunt, took the casserole because it seemed rude not to, and read the letter alone at my kitchen table. It was 4 pages long. It described every sacrifice my mother had made for me from the day I was born. It described my brother's mental health struggles, which were real and which I did genuinely feel for. It described the apartment as something that had come at a cost to the whole family, without specifying what cost, because there hadn't been one. It ended by asking me to drop the legal proceedings and have a conversation like adults. I folded the letter and put it in the folder with everything else. Then I sat down and wrote a list. Not for anyone else, just for me. Every time in the past 10 years I had bent my own plans to accommodate someone in my family. The shifts I'd picked up to lend Ryan money. The vacation I'd canceled when my mother had a minor surgery and decided she couldn't be alone. The certification exam I'd pushed back twice because there was always something happening with someone that I was supposed to be present for. It wasn't a list meant to prove anything. It was just a record. The kind of record I should have kept for myself years ago, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. Diane texted me that evening. "You holding up?" I replied, starting to understand the difference between loving people and funding them. She sent back, "That's the most expensive lesson." She wasn't wrong. Patricia called on the 31st day. The civil claim had been withdrawn. Fully. Ryan's attorney had submitted the paperwork without comment or concession, which Patricia said was the legal equivalent of walking out of a room without making eye contact. "It's over," she said. "The property is unambiguously yours. Any future attempt to claim residency rights will now have this dismissed claim in the record, which makes any new filing substantially harder to pursue." I said thank you, and I meant it in a way that felt larger than the words. That night, I sat by the window in my living room with a glass of wine and let myself actually look at the apartment the way I hadn't been able to in months. The bookshelves I'd built myself. The rug I'd picked out of a catalog at midnight after a long shift because the color made me feel calm. The study space with its clean desk and the certification materials I was finally going to get back to. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Ryan. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it." I read it twice. I didn't reply. Not because I was cruel, but because apologies are not the same as accountability, and I had learned the difference between those two things the hard way. At the cost of several $1,000s in legal fees and months of my life, I wasn't getting back. 3 weeks later, I passed the first section of my CRNA certification exam on the first attempt. I texted Diane. She sent back 11 exclamation points and a voice message that was mostly her yelling in what sounded like a parking lot. Life moved forward the way it does when you stop spending all of it in defensive position. I went back to studying in the evenings. I started sleeping through the night without waking up to imaginary sounds at the door. I had people over for dinner, Diane, a few colleagues, neighbors I'd been too distracted to know before. My mother called once more, about 6 weeks after the claim was dismissed. I picked up because I had decided in advance what I was going to say. "I'm not angry," I told her, "but things are different now. If you want to be in my life, it has to be because you want to know me. Not because you want access to what I've built. I'm not available for that anymore." She said, "You've changed." "Yes," I said. "I grew up." The silence between us was long. Then she said, "I love you, Rachel." "I know," I said. "I love you too. But love isn't the same as trust, and I'm going to need some time before I know how much of either I have left to give." She didn't respond to that. We said goodbye and hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a moment, holding the phone. Outside, it was raining. Houston rain, which doesn't apologize for itself. Just arrives and floods everything and then moves on, leaving the streets clean and the air smelling like something beginning. I made coffee. I sat at my desk. I opened my study materials. The apartment was quiet the way I had originally imagined it would be, the way I had worked for without being entirely sure I was allowed to want it. There was no glory in what had happened, no clean narrative about family healing or forgiveness achieved. Just a woman in her own home, in the rain, with work to do and the space to do it. My certification binder was open to a chapter on cardiac pharmacology. I picked up my pen. The door was locked, the camera was on, the deed was in my name. And for the first time in a very long time, not one of those things was something I had to fight to keep. They were simply facts, mine, clean and quiet and permanent. I started reading. Outside, the rain kept falling. And somewhere between the second paragraph and the third, I realized that peace isn't a feeling, it's a practice. It's the thing you build in the spaces where the noise used to be. And once you know how to build it, no one can take the knowledge away. I turned the page.